Hi everyone, you're here sewing with Cody and Pete, and in today's video we are working on the Bernina 590 and we're going to show you the wonders of pinpoint placement. As always, if you like the video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, share it with your friends, and show them how awesome pinpoint placement is. So here we are on the Bernina 590 and we're going to work with pinpoint placement. Pinpoint placement is a super amazing feature that really makes embroidering stress-free. Because the biggest stressor when it comes to embroidering is the fear that you've hooped your fabric crooked, or you've hooped your shirt crooked, and it's not, once it stitches, it's not going to be straight. That's a big fear no matter how long you've been embroidering, and especially when you're embroidering on something like a t-shirt, any type of article of clothing, or something that you really can't easily replace. So I'm going to show you how to use pinpoint placement and how easy it is. It really is. So what we're going to do, we're going to start with something simple. We're just going to start with the name, because this is typically what you'll be working with, especially with pinpoint placement. But this works with any design. Doesn't matter if it's a design that's built in, doesn't matter if it's a font or something you bought online or whatever. Pinpoint placement is not specific to any type of design. We're just going to work with the name. So what pinpoint placement is so when we hoop fabric, we typically use our grids to make sure our fabric's in there straight. And if it's not in there straight, you have to kind of unhoop it and then rehoop it until you get your fabric in there straight. That's no fun. Not only does it take too much time, and then still you have that, you're not too sure if it's in there right. You want that reassurance that I'm going to stitch it out straight. Pinpoint placement gives you that insurance, that reassurance. So here, with this little fabric that I've hooped, here it may be a little hard to see, but I specifically drew my line crooked. Because what pinpoint placement does is it makes your design as crooked as your fabric is hooped. So if you had your fabric, so let's go back a step. So whenever you have your object, your fabric, your t-shirt, your bag, or whatever that you want to embroider, you should always draw crosshairs. You need to know, while you're laying your fabric or your t-shirt out flat, you need to know where you need that center of your design to be, and you need crosshairs to show you where the design needs to be straight. Like, so if you have a name or a t-shirt, there are templates you can buy. You can really eyeball it, do some measuring, and just draw a horizontal line where the name needs to be stitched out straight, and then draw a vertical line directly in the center to find that center point, just like we have here. So I would have laid my fabric out first, or my t-shirt, and drew my crosshairs. So when I look at my t-shirt laid out in front of me on my table, those crosshairs are perfectly straight. They're perfectly in line with like a pocket, or they're perfectly in line with the collar, the sleeve, or whatever. Because if those aren't drawn straight, it's not going to stitch out straight. No matter what machine you have to have some reference on your fabric. Otherwise, there's no way to tell. So our crosshairs are our reference. So here we can see they're crooked on purpose. So I already typed in the name that I want, and I want to line up that name with this crooked line. Because this line may look crooked in my hoop, but in all actuality, in the real world, this would be straight once we take it off our hoop. So we want to make sure our design is as crooked as our fabric is in our hoop. So we have our name. So what we're going to do, we're going to go to pinpoint placement. So on the Bernina 590, 790 plus, and 880, we have to go to the little I, and then we can hit this icon right here. So it's the second column, second row, or second row, second column. It's the little square within the little square falling out. Now, if you have a 500 or a 700, you have that button over here. But you also have it here. So we'll click on it. So it's moving, and it's prompting us to put our hoop on. So one thing to remember is if you hadn't already stitched something out before or prepared a design before you did a pinpoint placement, and you selected pinpoint placement, it's going to tell you to remove your hoop. So many customers remove their hoop and put it back on. That's not what it said. It said remove the hoop, press the check mark, the module will move, and then it will prompt you like a message like this to put your hoop on or back on. You have to remember to hit that check mark because it's telling you to remove the hoop and verify that you removed it. Okay, let's get started. There's two ways to use pinpoint placement. The first way I'm going to show you is using the grid. So here I can select this grid, and what it does, we'll zoom in a little bit more. So it gives you 9 points. So 3 on the left, 3 in the center, and 3 on the right. And they represent top left, center left, bottom left, and so on and so forth. So what we want to do with this name, because it's a very block name, we're going to line up the bottom of the name, or the bottom of the letters, with that horizontal line. So the first thing, let's get it centered. So you can hit really any of these, but let's select the bottom, center, and you can see where it is in relation to my line. I really need to move it up. So I'm going to use my up-down arrow, or knob, essentially. So what we can do, we're going to hover right over the center. So we can drop our needle to really verify. Perfect. So what we can do, let's zoom out. Let's see. I'm not moving it. There we are. So we can see everything. So we've got it. We got the center of a design in center here, right where I want. So now let's select the left point here. And it has a little white line around it. It means we have it selected. So what we want to do, so we can see where we're at, we're a little bit above that line. So what we're going to do is we're going to move that down. So use this knob, turn it counterclockwise until it's lined up with the line. Perfect. So now what we need to do, because when we found the center, we just kind of moved it to the center. But now we want to set this point. We want to lock this point right here. And that's exactly what we're going to press, is press the set button. So now that point is set. So that point's not going anywhere. So now I can select this point, because we're working with the bottom, remember? So now you can see where it is in relation to the line, because it's just going straight over it, because this design on the screen is perfectly straight, but our fabric is not straight. So we can see we're about 3/4 of an inch off. So we're going to raise that needle back up. So let's move that design up. And let's see. Move a little bit more. Drop that needle, and we're perfectly on the line. So we're going to set that point. So now our design is as crooked as our fabric is, which is what we want. So we can see it on the screen, it's crooked, and so is our line. So when we stitch it, the design's going to stitch right on that line and be just as crooked as our fabric is crooked. And all you have to do is exit out. You can see how crooked it is here, and then go and start stitching. And you'll be good to go. So now let's go over another way of pinpoint placement. So let's go back to Edit and go to Pinpoint Placement. So as you can see, our design is still crooked and everything, but let's just say if it just wasn't right. Like, we set something when we shouldn't have set it, and it's just not right. You always have the butterfly. So the butterflies here will reset everything you did in pinpoint placement. If you need to mess up, and then you can go and do it again. So I'm going to show you the other type of pinpoint placement. So here, where it set up the grid, and those 9 points, is their preset points, which is great for most applications. But let's just say if you have a name or a design that's a little bit different. So let me go and select a totally different name. So here I selected my name. So the reason I selected this one on purpose is because if you notice that Y dips below the first 3 letters. So if we did the pinpoint placement grid system, it blocks it off, and see if we selected that bottom row, it's going by the lowest point, which is that Y. So if we stitched it out, the Y would be on the point, but the D, the O, and the C are going to be above where we need it to be. That's not quite going to work, especially if we're trying to line this up with a seam on a quilt or a seam on anything, something that's already permanently in our project. So what we're going to do here is we're not going to use a grid system. We're going to select our own 2 points. And remember, we always really need to work with 2 points. You can't work with any more than 2 points. So it's really only 2 points. So what we can do is we can select anywhere on the design. So let's say the bottom of the C. And remember, you can always zoom in to see exactly where that's at. So now I'm going to select the bottom of the C. I'm going to select the bottom of the D. So let's see. Oh, she didn't like that. So in this case, because I've taken my hoop off and put it back on, I moved my design around, but it's not moving the hoop, which I need it to move the hoop. So what we can do, we can exit out of that and hit the little needle to let it kind of recognize the hoop that I have on it, and that's because I took it off. So I can go to Edit and then go to my pinpoint placement. There we are. And it still recognizes that I have that C, that bottom of that C selected. Let's zoom in to ensure. Oh, where are you at? Okay. So I've got the bottom of the C. So let's move it up on that line. So here we have it on the line. So we can set that point. Let's zoom out and let's select the bottom of the D. You can always zoom in. So at the bottom of the D. So here we need to move it up to get it exactly on the line. So now it's directly on the line. And we need to set that point. So now we've got both points selected. So that design is going to stitch just as crooked as our fabric is, and it's going to stitch the name right along that line. And the Y will dip below the line. And what we could have done beforehand, we could have used the grid, and we could have made sure it lined up perfectly on the line. However, we're going to do something a little different. So we have the design exactly where we need it. And let's say, oh, I forgot to center it, which like we just did. So I can come to my hoop, and I can scroll down here and select the center point. So what just happened here? So we know the C, the O, and the D are going to line up perfectly on that line, and the Y is going to dip below it. However, it may be a little off this way because we didn't center it with that vertical line. So now we went to the machine to tell it, okay, find me the center of the design, which is what it did. So we have that crosshair right in the center. So we can see right there, we have that crosshair right between the O and the D. So what we're going to do, we're going to move the design on that vertical line. So here, where the needle is exactly where that crosshair is. So we can just move it, okay, exit out of here, and just move it over. And now the design is centered. And because we lined it on that line, it just shifted along that line. But this is something you really want to do beforehand. And we could always use our absolute check, which we've shown in other videos. So in this video, I'm trying to give you a whole bunch of information when using the pinpoint placement, because pinpoint placement is a wonderful feature, and there's a lot of uses for it. So because we've locked in that point, we're locked into that center, to use absolute check, it's not going to work. So what we need to do, we need to go back to our hoop and come here and deselect that center. Basically unlock the center. So now we can go and select the design. And so you can always go and check where that design is going to stitch out. So the D is still going to stitch nicely on that line. And the C is going to stitch on that line beautifully because it just shifted it over. So you can really see where that design is going to stitch out. So now you can go and just stitch it out, and it'll stitch it nicely, just as crooked as our fabric is. So there's one more thing with pinpoint placement that you can do. And this is really handy when it comes to quilting in the hoop. And I'm going to save that for when we're quilting in the hoop on the Bernina 590. So stay tuned for a quilting in the hoop video, working with pinpoint placement. That's another aspect that it absolutely shines in. So as always, if you like the video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, share it with your friends, and as always, happy sewing!